Welcome to the Sheckler Spotlight, where creativity meets purpose and conversation goes deeper. Join host Harrison Sheckler as he sits down with inspiring guests from all walks of life, artists, thinkers, musicians, and everyday heroes, to explore the stories that shape us, uplift us, and connect us. Now here's your host, Harrison Sheckler.
Hi, I'm your host, Harrison Sheckler. Today, I'm honored to have with us Mr. Jim Kaat, nicknamed Kitty, a legendary left-hand pitcher whose major league career spanned an awe-inspiring 25 seasons from 1959 to 1983 across 5 teams. A 3-time All-Star and 16-time Gold Glove winner, Jim led the AL in wins and complete games in 1966, pitched in 4 decades, and earned a World Series ring in 1982. His Twins era number 36 is now retired, and he was enshrined in the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 2022. Post-retirement, he built a storied broadcasting career, winning multiple Emmys and becoming a trusted voice in the booth. It's a true privilege to sit down with him today. The spotlight is now on you. Mr. Kaat, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Harrison. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, this is an honor. So I'm really excited to dive in. And I'd like to start. You grew up in Zeeland, Michigan, and you were the youngest of 4, I read. So I was wondering if you could just tell us about your childhood, your early passions, and how you got started in baseball and other sports. What was childhood like for you?
Well, Harrison, I thought, and this is when I went away to play professional baseball and look back on my childhood, I thought every kid in America grew up like I did.
Okay.
I mean, it was the most idyllic childhood. I lived about 3 blocks from school in Zeeland, Michigan. Ate breakfast, lunch, and as we call it in those days, supper at home every day. There was no McDonald's, no fast food, and a great little community of less than 4,000 people there. And my dad was an avid baseball fan, not a player, but great historian. He loved Connie Mack for some reason in the Philadelphia Athletics, because Connie Mack had to sell off his players almost every year to meet payroll. So I became a Philadelphia A's fan. And I think from the time I was 8 or 9 years old, all I talked about was I wanted to be a baseball player.
So who were those early influences, though, starting out? Who were you admiring? Who were you watching? You said the Philadelphia A's.
They had a couple of left-hand pitchers. One was Lou Brissy, who was a war veteran, but then along came Bobby Shantz. And Bobby was 5'6", 130 pounds. I hope to call him on his 100th birthday in 2 weeks.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, he's living in Ambler, PA. At the Gold Glove Awards dinner several years ago, when I was 80 and he was 93, I gave him a legacy award.
Wow.
Quite a thrill. But so he was my boyhood idol, because I was a small kid. I was the smallest athlete really on most of the teams I was on. And so Bobby was 5'6". I took a liking to him. And, he won the Most Valuable Player Award in 1952. But he was known as the best fielding pitcher in baseball. And people asked me, well, how did you acquire your knack to be a good fielder? I said, well, I did it on the radio, because on Sunday afternoon in Zeeland, I could listen to 8 games, 4 doubleheaders, Tigers, Cubs, White Sox, and then the Braves when they moved to Milwaukee. So when Bobby was pitching against the White Sox, the announcer would say, and here's Bobby Shantz, best fielding pitcher in baseball. Lands on the balls of his feet. He can go left or right. He's always ready for a ball hit back at him. So I would go in my backyard with a tennis ball, and off the back of the garage, throw that baseball, make believe I was Bobby Shantz. And when I got into professional baseball, the first spring training, we went through the pitcher's drills, and the coach said, kid, you look just like Bobby Shantz. I said, thank you.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so what did it look like in school, pitching and preparing for a career in baseball? I guess, like, first, when did you think it could actually become a career? That's what I'm curious about.
Well, I had that dream. I wanted to be a baseball player. I didn't know anything about the money they made. I didn't know anything like that. But um, I think when I got into high school, the first organized baseball I played really was American Legion ball. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't have Little League ball. All we did was go in the sandlot with, say, 8 of us, play 4-on-4. And then American Legion ball was my first organized baseball. I was 15 then. And I was very successful. And my dad never, my parents, here's an idea. I will give you a little insight into my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother saw me pitch one game. She saw me pitch game 2 of the 1965 World Series. And I caught the last out. It was a line drive back at me, and I caught it. And the fans in Minnesota are cheering. And my mother looked at my dad and said, "Oh, did they win?" And, and then in my hometown, when they would say, "Nancy, we heard your son is a pretty good baseball player," she said, "I've heard that. I think he's the one that throws the ball so they can hit it." And then, on my dad's side, he was at my games, but he was always in the back row, somewhere in the corner. Never said anything to me about good, bad, or how to throw a pitch, but he was always there. I was a basketball player, good basketball player for my size. I could run, dribble, play defense. Not a big time scorer, but one game I had a particularly hot night, scored probably twice as many points as I usually do. And walking home, I wondered, man, I wonder what my dad's going to think of the game I had tonight. So I walk in the door and I could smell the corncob pipe. And I walked in and he took a deep breath or a puff on his pipe and he looked at me and he said, "Well, Carl threw you some nice passes tonight, didn't he?" So he got the point across very quickly about, it wasn't about me, it was about our team. And if you're doing well, there's always somebody that's helping you.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of humility and humbleness that comes across there, and um, that's a good way to approach it, I guess, in a way, so you don't have like these big egos. I'm curious because you grew up in a different generation, and what do you see as the biggest difference between kids, like, let's say, going into Little League in high school and even into college compared to your generation?
Well, I think it's a bigger issue with parents than kids. Uh,
Mm,
I mentioned my dad was at the game. We have an interesting way. I have a podcast host, and we did one this morning called Kaat's Corner on Real Voices of the Game, and we talk about youth sports.
hmm
Dave, who's my host, Dave D'Agostino, and he does some coaching. He has 2 sons that play. So he said when they have tryouts, you look for the parents who sit the farthest away in the back row, way in the corner, versus the ones that are hanging on the screen and critiquing every move their child makes. So I had parents that my mother, as you know, was interested in how I did. Did I do well? Did I do my best? But and my dad never gave me advice; he just supported me. But kids today, I mean, it's their parents want them to be the next number one draft pick and get a $20 million contract, and they're grabbing the screen, the cyclone fence, and screaming at their child. All we did is we played the game, and if we won, we felt good. If we lost, well, too bad, but we didn't mope over it. And the first thing we said, okay, let's get to the A&W and have a root beer float. you know. And nowadays, the parents on the way home are saying, "Now, Johnny, you didn't keep your shoulder in on that swing. You didn't do this." So they become their parents' coaches, their kids' coaches. I was never subjected to that, and I think that's kind of sad in youth sports today. I'm going to be speaking at a facility called Frozen Ropes down in New York in about 2 weeks, and I'm going to be addressing athletes and coaches, parents and coaches, and they probably won't be too happy with a lot of things I say because of those exact things. I want parents to leave their kids in the hands of the coaches. Go see a movie, sit in the back row, and leave them alone. Let them enjoy the game.
Well, I think I have, a similar experience. I had a lot of, um, parents, you'd have the parents in the dugout. And I always thought that was kind of goofy, in my little league. It's like there's the coaches who are supposed to be there, but we don't need all the parents coaching at the same time. And I saw how it would take away from kids just enjoying the game. Because I mean, let's face it, a lot of them aren't going to become Major League Baseball players. They just want to enjoy the time and have a good time. And actually, I relate it to my music. So I would do all the sports, but I would also practice 6 to 8 hours in preparation a day for piano competitions. And you would see the same types of parenting with these other kids who are competing, is they weren't doing it for the love of it. I am so fortunate. My parents never said, Harrison, you need to be practicing. Oh, Harrison, your performance, we need to correct this, this, and this. They were just letting me enjoy it, letting the professors, give me the tutelage, but they were just being those supportive parents along the way. So it was a blessing. So that's one way I can relate with you on that.
Parents, yeah. I'll give you a little story because you're in Kansas City and I played in St. Louis. Mike Matheny was the manager of the Cardinals years ago and was an outstanding catcher, and he suffered 19 concussions, balls hit his back. So he had to retire. So he's living in Chesterfield, Missouri, outside of St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
The head of the youth baseball program said, would you coach our team? And Mike said, give me a couple of weeks to think about it. So in 2 weeks, he called the leader and he said, I will, but I want all of you to come over to my house. And they came over to his house and he gave me the contract. They had to stop. No parents and coaches, no hollering at the kids during the game, and no phone calls. If I get a phone call about why your son was playing, unfortunately, he's going to be off the team. In the decision, you got a phone call from the mother. And you had to tell the young boy, I'm sorry, if you need to leave. The parents broke the contract.
Well, he was pretty clear with his intentions at the beginning and how he was going to run it.
It wasn't like a shock to him. They knew that was the consequences. And we need more of that because we've got too many parents that are getting rude with umpires. They're getting in fights. I mean, that's just not what it should be for baseball. They should just be able to enjoy it.
Exactly. No, I'm with you on there. So I want to dive in to your debut. So you were in the American Legion and you were having some experience for there, but then your major league debut. What was the big difference in the level of play once you got to the majors? And what do you remember about those first games that season?
Well, my debut wasn't good at all, and quite frankly, I shouldn't have been called up to the big leagues. I had a little shoulder problem in Chattanooga. I'd set a strikeout record, struck out 19 in a game, and developed a little shoulder problem. So I took a couple weeks off, and then I came back, and I wasn't the same pitcher. My arm angle had dropped, and the manager called me in, said, "Kid, you're going to the big leagues." I said, "Well, I'm not the same pitcher I was earlier." He said, "Well, get up there and tell them about it." Now, that would never happen today.
No.
So I get called up, and I start the second game of a doubleheader in Chicago. I last maybe not quite 3 innings. And the coach there says, "What happened to you?" So I told him. And then a few weeks later, I got operated on a little cyst down in my back that was preventing me from getting my arm up in the right angle. So my debut was very uninspiring. But the thing you realize as a young player, the more time you put in the big leagues or any sport at the top level, is the speed with which it's played.
Mm-hmm.
You think in the minor leagues, when you compare it, the minor leagues to the big leagues, everything's in slow motion. And I think that's the same in all sports. And particularly now, because the athletes are bigger, faster, stronger. And so the speed at the top level of all sports, I think, is what gets players' attention when they get called up.
So if you had to compare your career and the speed and the level of the game at your time, and let's say you had the same tools, but you're starting now in today's game, do you think you would easily fit in and be able to, play the game, or is it so different now compared to, the 60s and the 70s?
Oh yeah, it's so different. I would have to have. I guess that's that Bob Seger line. I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then, something like that. But I'm sure. I'm sure if I came up in this modern era, I would have been subjected. Would my parents have been different than they,
Mm.
because they were raised in a different era? Uh, being raised when I was in the 40s and 50s, I wouldn't trade that for anything. Uh, and so today, maybe I'd be forced to fit in and have my parents say, well, we got to send you to a program to learn how to throw faster, So heaven forbid I would have been subjected to that. I feel badly for a lot of our youth pitchers today because in order to get, first of all, in order to make even their high school team, they probably have to reach a certain measurable in terms of how hard they throw or fast they throw. And then to get a college scholarship, why you have to throw, let's say, 92 miles an hour. I don't know if that's the exact number. Well, if you're a smaller kid like James Matthews, who I worked with when I went to New Zealand for a couple of months, he was a challenging kid, but he's 5'10", 165 pounds. He likes it, but he doesn't really throw like that. So I said to him, what are you going to do? I got to wait for him to mature and pay to fill out. And unfortunately, today, kids that are ready to go to college, like in my case, when I signed my contract in 1957, I went to Superior, Nebraska, not too far from the city. It was a 2-month summer league. I had some good games, a lot of bad games. And when the 2-month season was over, the manager said to me, kid, if you come up with a fastball, you got a chance. Well, I was 6'3", 180 then. I kind of gangled, kind of like Mama did. I hadn't filled out yet. And then a year later, I was 6'4", 225, and I did have a fastball, and I started having a lot of success. But if I were that size today, without a fastball, I'd get sent home from the tryout field.
Yeah, I mean, it is a different approach too with how these kids are throwing. I mean, I see people trying to, tell kids like when they're super young, like 13, to throw a curveball, or they're pitching way too hard. And I've seen kids in high school we had on my team, they're injured. I mean,
Right.
what would your advice be to the how you think a healthy approach to kids coming up through baseball is? What's your advice for them?
Well, first of all, until they're into maybe even college, uh, it should just be a recreation, not as much a competition.
Mm.
Uh, and kids they're growing physically, they're growing mentally, socially, all of that. And there's too much pressure put on them, primarily by parents and coaches. So I was fortunate I didn't have that. And from a skills standpoint, if I could spend time with pitchers, but there's a big divide now. The current administration and coaches, they have nothing to do with those of us that played at the Hall of Fame. For example, we had 52 current Hall of Famers, and I would say 90% don't watch baseball. 90%, in my case, I'm still affiliated with the Twins. I'm sort of an ambassador. The Twins pitching coach, I met him one time. He would never think about asking me, well, how did you do this or how did you do that? And that's sad, but that's the way it is, because they just feel like, well, what we did is a past era, and that just doesn't work anymore. So I still think if I could get a group of pitchers and say, okay, excuse me, we're going to work on, I mean, is that okay, that angle?
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
Uh, we're going to work on command of your fastball. I did this even when I coached for Pete Rose in the big leagues. I'd take my pitchers and I'd say, okay, we're going down to the bullpen. I want you to get warmed up and throw 10 fastballs in the strike zone, anywhere in the strike zone. Well, one pitcher, now this is in the big leagues, one pitcher threw 3 or 4, and I said, well, so far you're not even a one-pitch pitcher. So Tommy Browning was an exception. He didn't throw hard, but he could command his fastball. So you work on your finding a speed with your fastball that you can throw it in the strike zone 90% of the time. And then when you do that, you cut the plate in half, and you learn how to throw it to the outside half and the inside half. And then you cut it in quarters, and you learn to throw, because the fastball is the only pitch you can throw to all four quadrants of the strike zone. So if you can get a kid to command his fastball and teach him a decent changeup, that's all he needs on his way to a career. And then the breaking pitches and things like that can come in later. But right now, there's even a lot of big league pitchers suffering injuries because they're throwing these high spin horizontal break pitches and they're tearing up their elbow. We're having more surgeries than we've ever had before. It's like every day when I read the baseball news, it's another two pitchers undergoing surgery.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, and then I mean, you had, over 20 years of, well, over 4 decades. I mean, this shows the longevity of you taking care of yourself and being able to pitch so long. But you were also, when you were a starter, you were pitching complete games at times too, and we don't see that anymore. I mean, what do you think the difference is?
Yeah, that's not really the pitcher's fault. That's the system's fault because they're emphasizing velocity. For example, I heard a couple of weeks ago, oh, they just timed this 14-year-old. He threw 100-mile-an-hour pitch. I said, was it a strike? Nobody knew. He said, well, what difference does it make?
Right.
So we didn't chase velocity. We wanted control and movement and change the speeds. We were trained differently in spring training than they are today. They're hot housing the pitchers. They're making them soft.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we were trained. It's like if you had a really good racehorse and you thought this horse could win the Kentucky Derby. That's a 1.25 mile race. Well, you trained him to run 6 furlongs, which is 3/4 of a mile. And you never trained him to run longer. He's not going to win the Kentucky Derby.
Right, right.
So unfortunately, it's the way they're trained. And the emphasis on velocity, and they got these organizations, coaches, managers who have never pitched that are saying, well, we can only use them to throw 100 pitches. Well, we came up with that. I mean, I threw anywhere 9-inning games from high 70s because the press box would keep track of the pitches. We didn't keep track of them in the dugout.
Mm-hmm.
Probably my favorite game was I had a shutout early in 65. I walked one. I didn't strike out anybody. I threw 81 pitches and there were 16 groundouts. So, we didn't chase velocity. Then I had a 12-inning game where I threw 186 pitches. So, but we didn't pay attention to it. We were trained to do that. And today, mentally and physically, they're trained, oh, I'm near 100 pitches. I guess my day is done. And it's kind of unfair to pitchers because there's a lot of talented pitchers today that we should be able to see, for example, a Garrett Crochet going against Otani, or somebody like that, a real pitcher's duel. And we just don't see that anymore because they're not going to be around at the end of the game.
No, that's a good point. It'll be curious. I'm curious to see, someone like an Otani who, they're already saying, well, he's going to have a Hall of Fame career, but that's like if he stays healthy. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it. And then also if they let him play the game. But there's so many different rule changes. That's what I want to pick your brain on too. The game's played a little bit differently. Pitchers used to hit, right? I mean, you have a game. I think I read, was it you had a shutout and hit a home run in?
I've done that. I think that's it. The Twins. I have more of those with the Twins. Nobody's done that. I think I have 3 of them that were shutouts where I hit a home run because Harmon Killebrew, who was a longtime teammate and great friend, and so we get beat in a close game and we'd be walking up the tunnel and he'd look at me. He said, Jim, you know how you can stop that? I said, what, Harm? He said, shut him out and hit one out. So I was able to do that a few times. Yeah, that's a big thrill when you can do that.
Well, and now we only really have Otani, who's now the pitcher and a great hitter. But now that you have the DH, in both leagues, like you eliminate that. And what do you think of taking the bat away from pitchers in this era?
Well, the DH is a thing, it's there to stay because even kids in Little League now, they use the designated hitter. So we were fortunate and I was fortunate as a youngster that we became baseball players that just happened to be pitchers.
Hmm.
So we learned how to hit, we learned how to bunt, we learned how to run the bases, we learned how to field our position. I played a little first base, I could play a little center field. Well, today, pitchers, it's embarrassing to see them try to run the bases or bunt. They just don't know because even in little league, they're not asked to do it. So we're living with the DH. I think it would be interesting. I mentioned this to the commissioner. I don't know if it would ever happen, but I said, what if we penalized a team that took their starting pitcher out, for example, in the sixth inning when he had a comfortable lead and he could pitch more? If you take him out, you forfeit your DH. Well, of course,
Whoa.
he said, well, we need more offense in the game because batting averages are down. I said, batting averages are down because you're not teaching hitters to hit right. You're just training them to swing as hard as they can, hit it out of the park. I said, Tony Gwynn, Wade Boggs, guys like that, they wouldn't even get signed today. My teammates in St. Louis, Willie McGee, because the whole emphasis, Dave Kingman would be the number one draft pick because he either hit a home run or he struck out.
Right.
That seems to be the trend. Yeah.
So are there changes to the game that you think are appropriate changes and are good for the game? And then is there a change in the game that stands out to you and you're like, oh, I really wish they didn't do that?
Well, there are a lot of them. I would say I wish they didn't do that. I think the one change that the game needed because pitchers needed it because pitchers and catchers and information from the sideline they were automatically taking too much time. I
Mm-hmm.
think the pitch clock is one rule that's done a lot for the game. The games are not as long and boring. They have a crispness to it that they didn't have before that. So I like that one. Uh, I don't like the runner on second base. I think what they did in the All-Star game, and there's now a minor league team, the Ballers out in Oakland, and they try some of these new things that the Savannah Bananas are doing. So
Right.
they have the knockout rule in extra innings. They have a little home run hitting contest, and they each get 5 swings or something, and so the extra innings gets over with quicker than putting a man on second. I don't like that. I don't like when they came up with a pitcher has to face 3 hitters. So when I was with the Cardinals, my job when we won the World Series, I was a lefty guy. So Whitey Herzog would bring me in to face a left-hand hitter. Well, if I got that hitter out, he doesn't want me to stay in and face Mike Trout. He wants a right-hand pitcher. Well, now with the rules, you can't do that. I think it's a stupid rule. And I don't like I said, I don't like the runner on second base. I don't like you can only throw to first base X amount of times. They've got all these rules that are training wheels for hitters and offense. Well, you can't steal bases. Okay, we'll make the bases bigger. You're having trouble finding the barrel of the bat. Well, we'll make you a torpedo bat. So, they're taking the skill out of it. They're just trying to change it with equipment and rules.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of frustration with it, and I was talking to some other former ball players, and putting the putting the player on second base, in extra innings, to me that's kind of bizarre because it's also like, who gets the win or the loss, for that, like the pitcher too, when you're throwing someone out there, and then also with when you mentioned like they did it in the All-Star game too, where they ended it in a home run derby because they were tied,
Right.
like
Right.
who gets the win or loss, with that. That's kind of, to
Yeah,
me,
it's a
that's
good
just kind of
question.
odd.
Yeah, I guess the pitcher that pitched last. Yeah, I know. I know the runner on second. The pitcher doesn't get charged with an earned run. But some
Mm-hmm.
of the questions that came up at our Hall of Fame members meeting with the commissioner was why don't they start with a runner on first base? You might be forced then to bunt them over and play a little more. But second base, I don't like that rule. In fact, I wish they just had the knockout home run. Okay, the game's tied. You pick your best hitter. The sad thing at the All Star game when they had that when Schwarber hit the home run is that the 2 players that they would have picked to compete would have been Otani and Judge.
Yeah.
Well, they were both on a private plane flying back home. They weren't even there. Yeah. So that's kind of sad.
That is sad, and the fans, I think we need to think about what the fans really want too. And then going back to pure baseball, at least that's my opinion, and I think your time, that was pure baseball. You were playing the game how it was supposed to be played. That's my
Yeah.
that's my opinion on it,
Well, they called it baseball because the game was played base to base.
Right, exactly.
At a single, you'd either hit and run or you'd bunt. And now it's just Powerball. It's like a video game. And that's why it's hard to compare era to era because of that. It's still the same game: 9 innings, 3 outs, 4 balls, you walk, 3 strikes, you're out. But the way they operate it is so much different. And from that standpoint, I'm glad that they being MLB, they like to say, well, interest is up, attendance is up. Well, attendance is up in certain cities.
Right.
Minneapolis is going to have an all-time low for their years at Target Field. The other night they had 11,000 people, and they may have had 3,000 no-shows. We led the league in attendance in '65 with 1,000,004. The Twins this year, 60 years later, are going to draw about 1,000,008.
That's
That's
sad.
yeah, that's embarrassing. So you have the top-loaded Dodgers, Giants, Padres, Phillies, that are drawing big crowds, Mets and Yankees. So all of a sudden, okay, the interest is up, but overall, I see a lot of empty seats at these other games. And that's where maybe they better bring the Savannah Banana rules in, and fans will say, our team doesn't have a chance to win the pennant, but let's go. They got some crazy stuff happening out there.
Well, it might get people because they're selling out. I mean, they were just in Kansas
Oh,
City and they sold, I think they did 2 nights and every seat was sold out. I mean, good for them. It's like what are the PT Barnum, of baseball.
right.
But it's also its own thing, it's not baseball. So I personally think if you want to get people in the stands, you play really good baseball. That's
Yeah,
pretty much it.
right. Yeah, I think for the minor leagues and for entertainment to get them there. But yeah, I think that's been proven. One of the myths with some club owners that don't want to budge on spending more money is can you prove to me that by spending more money, you will win more games? And the answer to that is if you spend more money, you may give your team a chance to win more games, but you still have to have the best baseball players
Right.
that
Well,
play
so
the best.
do you think there should be a salary cap because you have teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees who are, just gathering all of these great players, and some of those markets they can't compete.
No, I think there should be a salary floor. I,
Okay.
I think okay, Kansas City, we can't afford to spend the money the Dodgers and those teams are. The Packers are a small market in football, but they win.
Yeah.
So I guess there is a cap in some way with football. But if you go to the Kansas City owners and say, look, you better take on a few partners. Now, the Twins have done that. They're taking on some new partners to help them eliminate their debt. Are they going to spend more money next year? Who knows? They even had 2 of their star players, one who I stay in close touch with, Joe Ryan, and
Mm.
then Byron Buxton. They have spoken out on some podcasts that what's our future? I mean, are they going to spend money, buy some players so we can compete? Here they are down in 5th place. There's no incentive. There's no way they're going to win the division if they don't start spending more money. So in order to do that, the current owners, they're not as wealthy as, say, the Dodgers or some of the other teams. John Middleton, who I know well, the owner of the Phillies, he is committed to spend whatever it takes to win. But
Hmm.
some of the small market owners may not be able to do that. So I think their best bet is to start recruiting some partners so that they can spend more money, and there should be a floor because some of these owners for years, like Tampa Bay, they were probably showing a small profit because they didn't spend that money they got from the central fund, the luxury tax that the Dodgers and teams like that pay. They weren't spending it on players. They're
Hmm.
just retiring debt and showing a better bottom line, better profit and loss statement. So we need a salary floor.
Also, another thing on one of these changes that I wanted to pick your brain on is the changing the divisions. Have you seen them talk about that, where they would group it into, the West, like
Yeah.
Midwest, and then the East? Do you think that will happen?
Years ago, baseball was run for a short period of time by Paul Beeston, who was the CEO of Toronto. Wonderful man, brilliant man, great vision, loved the players, and he was too favorable toward the players to suit the owner, so he didn't last long. But I remember giving him a plan where, first of all, the baseball season should be about 100 games.
Mm.
And then in September, that's playoff month. So at the time, there were 24 teams, and you could divide the country up into fourths, and you'd have four divisions where you'd play a lot of games in your division, not so many interleague.
Hmm.
But that's never going to happen. I mean, in my era, baseball owned the summer. Football was over. Hockey was not that popular. None of those major sports were as popular as baseball right after World War II. That's the Cleveland Indians drew 2.7 in 1948. So we owned the summer. Well, now we don't own the summer anymore. Football just started.
Hmm.
They're already talking the Bruins hockey in Boston.
Yep.
Basketball didn't end that long ago. So there's only so much time and so much money for the sports fan to spend on sports. So baseball won't do it, but we really need a shorter season. It's too long.
I want to take it back. We're going to go back to your career and your time in baseball. And so you were with the Senators, and then you went, they went to Minneapolis, and you were with the Twins. And then 1965, you had the World Series, and you faced Koufax. Was it three starts?
Yes.
Yeah, three starts. So I'm curious, at that point in your career, what was going through your mind in facing someone like Sandy Koufax?
The interesting thing, Harrison, was that in those days, there was only one game a week on TV, and that was Saturday afternoon. Pee Wee Reese and Dizzy Dean, they get game of the week. So when Sandy was pitching for the Dodgers, we were playing as well. So I never saw him in person until I faced him in game two of the World Series. And I remember after 3 innings, we each went through the batting order rather quickly. I said to Johnny Sain, if I give up a run, this game's over because nobody's going to hit this guy. The cool story about Sandy pitching game 2, 5, and 7 and not pitching game 1 because it was Jewish holiday, Drysdale started. And
Mm-hmm.
we knocked Drysdale out in the 4th inning. So Walter Alston came out to take the ball, and Drysdale looked at him and said, "Bet you wish I was Jewish, don't you?" And now Sandy has become a friend, and it was so cool at this year's induction that I sat next to him at the Hall of Fame members dinner, and he started going into details about that game 7. He shut us out in game 5, and then he shut us out in game 7. But that's the last World Series where every win was a complete game win, a 7-game series.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's 60 years ago. Because
Yeah.
the Twins just honored our '65 team in Minnesota. Honored us for being the 60th anniversary for going to the World Series.
How many of your teammates were able to make that? Or they're still
Well,
around?
there was only 4 of us there. I think there are 13 of the real 25-man roster. The 40-man roster is about 19. There's 13 that are still living, but a lot of them, we have some in their mid-90s. They can't travel anymore.
Sure,
So
sure.
we have Tony Oliva. Jim Perry flew in for it. Tony lives there, and Dick Stigman lives there. So we had 4 of us there in person. That was it.
So the following year in 1966, that was your 25 wins, 19 complete games. So how did you find a rhythm? And then some of these teammates, you know, what kind of team did you have backing you during those 25 wins?
Thing is, '66 we had basically the same team we had in '65, but the Orioles got Frank Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
He won the Triple Crown, and he really single-handedly turned that team around. Uh, and they became just too tough for us to beat. We went to the playoffs 2 years against them, couldn't beat them. But I think that in '66, it was just strictly that the Orioles were a better team. They had better pitching depth, but pitching is different when you look at the numbers in terms of, okay, '66, my record was 25-13. I had 19 complete games.
Mm-hmm.
'65, I started 42 games, but I only completed 7 because I had a little shoulder issue and my shoulder would tighten up. And so I averaged about maybe 6 and a fraction innings a start. Well, then in '66, because I'd put a lot of stress on my shoulder, I learned to short on the ball and use a little more wrist and a little more forearm action. And lo and behold, I was a different pitcher. Then you fast forward to '71, when I probably had, if you looked at the statistical line, I had 15 complete games, 5 shutouts, 270 innings, good ERA. My record was 13-14. So I had to take a $250 cut in pay. But I would argue with our owner, general manager, we didn't have any recourse. Well, you didn't win. You were 13-14. I said, yeah, but if you look at my numbers, I pitched as well as I did when I won 25. But see, in those days, that didn't matter. It was just wins. That's all they judged you on.
That's interesting. With the different teams that you played and different ball clubs, how would you, if you had to kind of define each club, what was your experience with each club?
Well, of course, the Twins I was with the longest, and we finally put together a complete team. We always had the power hitters like Harmon Killebrew, Bob Allison, and then we put our complete team together. They just had 10 teams in the league then, and we won the pennant. We won 102 games in '65. That ended the Yankee 4-year streak. Chicago, we had good individual talent. Dick Allen was an MVP one year, but Oakland was better. That's when, they won 3 in a row, the Oakland A's. Then I went to Philadelphia, and those were the most talented, physically talented teams I was on, with Mike Schmidt and Steve Carlton and Greg Lazinski and on and on. We had all-stars, but we ran into the Cincinnati Reds and the Dodgers in the playoffs and couldn't get past them. And then the one year with the Yankees was sort of it's kind of like being with the Savannah Bananas.
Really?
That was the Bronx Zoo. Boy, that was quite a year. The Yankees had such a following and such characters. It was bittersweet. That was the year that Thurman was killed, Thurman Munson.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward to 1982, I was so fortunate to that was my last full season. And
And you were a reliever at that point, right?
Right. Yep.
Yep.
So in all the major sports, I played golf with Ray Bork, great hockey player. I played golf with Ray Bork a couple months ago. He went 22 years before he got his Stanley Cup. And that was the record for a player in a team sport to wait that long to get a championship. I went 24. 1982 was my 24th complete season. And then the Cardinals, who hit 67 home runs as a team, but stole 200 bases, that was really the most exciting and the most enjoyable year. I'm known as a Minnesota Twin, rightly so. I was in that organization a long time. That meant a lot to me. But that one year was the most exciting year I had in baseball.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, it's been an amazing career. So that's the standout year for you. And then eventually you make a transition after retirement of 25 seasons to, well, you went to the Reds, right? You did some coaching with the Reds.
Yes.
And then you went into broadcasting. And I'm curious, not everyone has the talent to do that.
Because the sun's coming down. I'll give you there we go. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Beautiful. Not everyone has the talent to go from a player to on air. I'm curious, how did you make that transition?
I took speech classes in high school. I was in speech competitions. I always felt comfortable in front of a microphone talking baseball. And I would say in the 70s, if there was a rain delay, they didn't have cable programming. They would call down to the clubhouse when I was with the Phillies, Richie Ashburn Harry Callis, their producer, would say, "Can you come up to the booth and visit with us during this rain delay?" So that's what I would do. And Jody Shapiro, who was working for Major League Films, later became the executive producer for Home Team Sports, which was a cable outfit in the early 80s. He said, "You should get into this business when you're done playing." So when there was a strike in 1981, he called me up and he said, "Would you like to do minor league games with Ralph Kiner, AAA games? Because we're going to televise AAA games." So that's kind of how I got my start, doing AAA games with Ralph and Warner Fusel, and then college games with ESPN. And I was fortunate in the mid 80s, NBC would have a Saturday doubleheader and they would have backup games for each game. So there were 4 games. So I was on one of the 4 teams and I worked with Dick Enberg, who was a giant in the business. And he taught me so much. Then Dick Stockton, then Bill White, who was my broadcast mentor with the Yankees. So like baseball, I had Warren Spahn and Bobby Shantz and players to look to and to try to pick their brain. In announcing, I was fortunate to do the same thing, John Madden, and they taught me a lot. I had to try to attack announcing just like I did a player.
I think it's amazing that you've had, it's almost like 2 different lives, but still in baseball and still in this sport that you love. Over a career, some people will get inducted, for their playing. Some people get inducted, to the Hall of Fame for as an announcer, as a manager. You got in as a player eventually, and it was in 2021, the golden era. When did you first hear, like, when did you receive the call? What were your thoughts when you received the information that I am a baseball Hall of Famer?
Well, I was on the ballot several times.
Mm-hmm.
The way the Veterans Committee works is they have a historical review committee. There's probably 100, like right now, there's probably 100 players that are eligible. And then in December, we'll find 8 names. In my era, I got in 2022 actually, and then there were 10 on the ballot, and the
Mm-hmm.
writers vote for 3. The committee could vote for 4. So I was on there 3 different times. I missed by a vote, but usually what the Hall of Fame does, like this year, and I knew from the committee that I had a really good chance this year. I had former executives, former writers, players that I played with, that I played against, and I thought I was going to get the fairest hearing I could get. So they tell you if you could be at your phone between 5:15, 5:45, we don't call with bad news, but we will call and then we announce it on MLB Network. So I'm sitting watching watching golf, trying to keep my mind off it, and it's about 5:35 and the phone rings and the pings and I look at it's 917 area code. Well, that's not Cooperstown. Cooperstown's like 607 or something. I said, "Well, I'll answer it." And the voice on the other end is, "This is Jane Clark." Well, that's the only sentence you have to have here is because Jane Clark is the chairman of the Hall of Fame. Her grandfather founded it. And you know that Jane Clark is calling you to tell you that you were going to be a Hall of Famer. So, right then a gazillion thoughts go through your mind. But, in my case, it was much more of a gratitude than a celebration because I didn't know if that day would ever come. But I was so humbled by that, still am, because I think maybe I'm the only starting pitcher that was voted into the Hall of Fame for longevity, dependability, over dominance. Like Sandy had 6 dominant years. I had a few dominant years, but I would say I'm there mostly because my body of work over a long period of time.
So now that you're on the other side, you're in the Hall of Fame. Who do you see now, being on the other side? Who do you see deserving of the Hall who's not yet in?
Well, the first name would be my friend Tommy John,
Hmm.
because I've told Tommy this many times and I say it publicly. I think Tommy belonged in there ahead of me. And a lot of people think of Tommy John because he had surgery. Well, Tommy John had more wins after the surgery than he did before. And he played a year longer than I did. He has more wins. I think he certainly deserves to be in there. I think Dale Murphy should be under consideration. This year, I think Keith Hernandez will be on the ballot. Um, I'm forgetting a couple names, but I know that I usually have Dwight Evans from the Red Sox could be a possibility. So there's a lot that are so close, and I might be asked to be on the committee. I'm not sure, but Steve Hurt, who ran the Elias Sports Bureau for years, the statistical bureau, he sits in there and he has the comparables that can give the committee. Like in my case, he mentioned Mike Messina, who's in, and then I had a good supporter in Fergie Jenkins. Fergie had just a couple more wins than I did, but his career was so dominant. I mean, he won 20 games 8 times for a last place team. So there's a lot of almosts that it's going to take a lot of discussion to decide, who gets in and who doesn't. Tommy's name comes up again in I think 2027. Maury Wills is another candidate. So there's a lot of potentials, but you have to have the right 16 people on the committee. I was on the ballot a couple times when I saw the names, and no disrespect, but I saw the name David Glass, who used to own the Royals. Well, he never got into baseball until 1999. He doesn't know anything about my career, but
Right.
he was a big donor of the Hall of Fame, so they put him on the committee. So
There's some politics in it.
so fortunately, I think now they're doing a better job of putting actually baseball people there that can judge you on what you did as a baseball player.
So looking back, across 8 decades of baseball from player to commentator, like what would you say is the deepest insight or message that you would share with young players and fans today?
Ooh. Well, I think with young players,
Yeah, and fans today, who love the game.
yeah. Well, I think fans today just accept the fact that today's game is built around home runs. It's just a totally different game. We're not going to change that, but I hope that they, instead of looking at their cell phones, I hope they would appreciate the physical ability of the players today because they are much more physically talented than we were. They're bigger, faster, stronger. I don't think they know how to play the game of baseball. They don't know how to play to the scoreboard.
Mm-hmm.
It's 6-0. Like the great Robin Roberts, who was a Hall of Famer. Robbie said they'd ask me, "How do you pitch Willie Mays?" He said, "Tell me the score, the inning, and the count." So, that says it all. You got to learn to play to the scoreboard. I don't think they do that today. They just play at bat to at bat. This at bat's a chance to hit a home run. If I hit 300 fly balls, the statistics say at least 25 of them are going to be home runs. But I hope the fans that would enjoy the individual ability that some of these, like Nolan Arenado when he was healthy, the plays he could make at third base, and Matt Chapman, they're just unbelievable. But as far as the actual playing of the game, it's just kind of a home run derby. Young players, I would tell players, parents and coaches more than players, is will you please let these kids enjoy the game, drop them off at the field, go see a movie, go out for dinner, and then come back and don't ask them anything about the game. Just say, "Johnny, we're going to take you to A&W root beer. We're going to get a root beer float." Good.
I love it. I love it. So now you've had this amazing career. You're a baseball Hall of Famer. You've just just amazing accomplishments. What does Jim Kaat do in his free time now? What are you doing in retirement? Where do you find enjoyment now?
Well, I do this podcast. I still follow the game. I don't watch it. I follow it. Most of my leisure time is spent playing golf. One of the things I have taken great interest in is I've started to research the history of rock bands.
Really? Rock bands?
I'm a big U2 fan.
Really? Okay.
Just saw a movie. My wife and I saw a movie 2 nights ago called Songs of Surrender. And Bono, it's basically his one-man life story about why he wrote these songs like Pride of Love, Streets with No Name. And so I enjoy doing that. I started learning to play the guitar. I do a little Tai Chi.
Really?
Yeah. Uh, so I keep myself occupied that way. I watch a lot of golf. I like to watch a lot of horse racing. This
Yeah.
is a great time of the year. They're racing at Kentucky Downs. The Breeders' Cup will be coming up. So those occupy my time. But I do follow baseball. Like Carl Willis, I coached him in Cincinnati. He's now the tribe. I don't call them the Guardians. He's the tribe pitching coach. So I like to see them do well. So I follow teams.
I love that. Well, you're staying super active and you have a lot. I love that you have this interest in rock bands and U2. I mean, U2 is
Yeah.
great. They
Oh,
were
they're the
great.
best.
Have you seen them in person?
I wish I did. They're not going to have another tour till 2026 or 27. It would be so cool to see them in person. But I love, I know all of them, like uh, Paul Hewson, that's Bono's name. David Evans is Edge. Then you got Adam Clayton, and you got Larry Mullen, the drummer, who started to have four kids that got together in high school and become who they've become and the good they've done for mankind with their charity work. That's just unbelievable.
It is. Oh yeah. I mean, it's we talked about baseball in a different era, definitely with music too. It was a different era than it is today. And some of the artists you see, it's just a different time. And those were good people, amazing musicians. They were fantastic and multifaceted. And another band that I really like is the Eagles.
Well, yeah.
Um, oh my gosh, I love them. And there's the ones that are still alive, they're still touring, they're still playing. It's amazing.
I've heard Glenn Fry and Don Henley separately in some of our sporting events perform solo events. Yeah, they've stood the test of time.
It's amazing people in their career. I love it. I hope my dad's a huge Eagles fan, and he's just like, if I had another job, I would have been a roadie for the Eagles. So
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Mr. Kaat, this has been such a pleasure to have this chance to visit with you, hear about your amazing career. At the end of every podcast, we do a quick rapid fire round, 1 minute round of questions.
Okay.
And so if you are ready for this, I will. Oh, I don't know where I put my timer, but I have it. I will get my list ready.
Okay.
And it'll be 1 minute. So, are you ready, sir?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Who was the best catcher you ever pitched to?
Phil Roof.
Preferred pitch, fastball or curveball?
Sinking fastball.
Toughest hitter you ever faced?
Al Kaline.
Who was your greatest teammate?
Hard to say because I had too many of them to name one.
Who made you laugh the most in the clubhouse?
Louis Tiant.
Favorite ballpark?
Wrigley or Fenway.
Favorite baseball movie?
Trouble with the Curve with Clint Eastwood.
That's a good movie. Best advice you received from a manager?
Throw strikes and keep the ball low.
What was your game day meal?
Most of the time, pasta about 8 hours before game time.
And did you prefer day or night games when they had night games?
Didn't matter. It was more who I was pitching against than time of day.
Who was the best broadcaster to work with, or who did you have the most fun with?
Kenny Singleton.
If not baseball, what career?
I think I have liked to have been a high school basketball coach.
Okay. And that's the last question. What's your Kitty nickname backstory?
Chuck Stobbs, who was a left-hand pitcher with the Senators, pronounced my name, as many people did, Cat.
Oh.
So they used to kid me about, do you have a brother Bob, a brother Tom Cat? And then there were three pitchers. I'm running out of battery here, but I think I can get a few more. There were three pitchers: Harry the Cat Burkeen, Harvey Haddix, who they nicknamed the Kitten, and they found out I was a good fielder, so they called me kind of the Kitten, and then it shorted to Kitty, and that's kind of where that nickname came from.
I love it. Well, that was a fun insight into Mr. Kaat. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I honestly, I could listen to you talk for hours. I love hearing all these stories and just about the game of baseball that I love. So thank you so much for your time, Mr. Kaat.
Well, Harrison, it's been enjoyable. It's a lot of fun for me as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Sheckler Spotlight with your host, Harrison Sheckler. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the show with a friend. New conversations drop regularly, so stay tuned. And thanks again for listening and being a part of the journey. Follow Harrison Sheckler on social media and visit harrisonsheckler.com to learn more.